Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Climbing Calm. In today's video, I'm going to talk you through 2 different exercises that will help you improve your psychological process when trying to try hard in climbing. Now, these are 2 psychological exercises that we're going to pair up with physical activities to make them align with climbing. So although I'm pairing these exercises with the physical side of training, what I want is the focus to be on what your mind is doing in this process and the psychological side of the climbing bit, so you can better understand during climbing. In the words of Alex Megos, disclaimer, warm up. I'm pretty sure he said that once in one of his training videos, I can't remember. The first exercise that I want to bring to the table, I'm going to call a Psych Pull, and this is a psychological exercise that you do with your brain while doing a physiological thing. Okay, so with this, what you're going to do is pick an exercise. For the example, I'm going to use a pull-up. There are alternatives that you can use, like if you feel like you want to deadlift, because this is something that's more relative to you, whether you're injured or within your abilities, a deadlift also works. So I've picked the weighted pull-up because I think for the purposes of this psychological exercise, it works. I've added a few kilograms to this. So for the physical side of this exercise, you're going to do a couple of reps. You want it to be quite challenging and you want it to like challenge your power systems. So a deadlift or a pull-up, I'm going to keep talking about a pull-up for this example. I would recommend doing 2 reps, having a big rest, as if it were a power training exercise. But what we're going to do, the psychological part of this, so remember the whole point of these exercises is to train your brain, change up your thinking each time you do 2 sets. So for the first example, what we're going to do is a power pull. This is where, when you're doing the exercise, so in this case a pull-up, what I want you to do is like muster all of that strength in your mind and think, what does it feel like to psychologically pull really hard? When you get really psyched, you muster up that mental energy and you're like, cool, I'm gonna pull really hard. So I want you to try and do 2 pull-ups where you're like, whoa, let's go, let's really pump it, let's try psychologically really well to do 2 reps of a pull-up, have a big rest, have a chill, regroup, doom scroll, talk to a pal at the wall, whoever is in the training area, and then try the second psychological exercise where you're going to do the same physical thing, so don't change anything. If you're adding weight, use the same amount of weight. If you're doing deadlifts, use the same amount of weight. But what I want you to do is called a passive pull. And now a passive pull is where you just calmly and with as little psychological effort as possible, just gather yourself, become very present, very calmly do the exercise. Do 2 pull-ups calmly, see how it feels. And now the point of this, you might be thinking, I hear you ask, is why? So in doing this, what you're doing is helping yourself build the psychological tools that enable you to understand the difference between when you need that psychological bit of oomph and what that feels like for you, as far as if there's some harder moves on a crux or a boulder problem when you need to understand what it feels like to be like, yeah, I'm gonna really crank hard. In alternating between these 2 different psychological states of a power pull and a passive pull, you can better understand what it feels like and how to use it as part of your psychological toolkit as a climber. And then you might wonder, what's the point of having a passive pull? And I think it's very worth being mindful while doing these psychological exercises to think about whether the physical aspect of the exercise felt easier when you were doing a powerful pull or whether when you were doing a passive pull, because it's worth having these 2 different kinds of psychological effort to think about when you're climbing, are you losing energy? Because there have been times where I've been like, yeah, I'm on a boulder, I'm going to pull really hard, and then you use that psychological oomph. But there have also been times in my climbing where I've experienced myself climbing into a crux and I'm feeling a bit fatigued, I'm feeling pumped in whatever way that is for you. And I'm like, cool, I'm going to calmly, passively execute this in a really powerful way, and I'm going to do these moves, and you do it efficiently. So working and alternating between these 2 mediums of the passive pull and the power pull helps you better understand what it is that makes your brain tick. And I think it's very worth noting what feels physically harder when you're using that psychological power pull or the passive pull, because then you can understand if you're climbing efficiently and if you're over gripping, and when it's necessary that you need to like really unleash that powerful oomph that does play into bouldering very nicely. It's not exclusive to bouldering, but it is beneficial, whereas you might want the passive pulling for a very typical red point experience to benefit when to be most efficient. I have no idea if you guys can hear those birds, but we're gonna carry on. The second exercise that I'm gonna bring to the table, I'm calling it one more move. So with this one, the physical side of it, you need a circuit board at your wall, and you want to pick a circuit that is not your max red point, but also not your warm-up. It's got to be something that's spicy, but with no heartbreaker moves, something that is very sustained and, relative to your ability, quite challenging. For example, for the purposes of this video, my best red point is like 7C, but I picked a 6C+/7A to just keep lapping and doing like circles on. The one more move concept on a circuit board is just essentially eliminating all of those other little voices that tell you in yourself that you're pumped, that you're gonna fall off, that you can't sport climb, that you don't have endurance. Ignore them. The one thought you need to have in your head for this exercise is just make one more move. What you're going to achieve psychologically by telling yourself to just make one more move is, firstly, hopefully you'll surprise yourself in your ability, and you'll be surprised at how much longer you were able to stay on. But secondly, what you're going to do is learn what it feels like to try at your physical limit and keep going. Because in this state, if you just tell yourself the only thing that matters to me right now is the next move, is the next hold, you can better understand what it feels like to climb through those physical messages of fatigue, of like full body ache, of forearm pump. Hopefully what you gain coming out of this exercise is a good understanding of what your personal headspace feels like when you're ignoring and pushing past all those things that tell you that you're pumped, that you're getting fatigued, because when I'm climbing with power endurance or endurance, I feel like in my head I have two levels. I have the psychological fatigue, and that'll be my level of panic, and that can be to do with leading, but very often it's to do with how I'm managing all the physiological side of things that are telling me like, oh, you're starting to get pumped. And very often the case is that your psychological reaction to the things that your body's telling you, like, oh, my arms are really tired, or I've got a shaking leg, or my forearms are about to explode, and your mind can panic, right? But if you just ignore all of those and try and tell yourself that you're in a good place to fall off, if you're doing circuits at a wall surrounded by mats, you can just tell yourself, I'm going to try one more move. And that is the beauty of this exercise, because you tell yourself what it is like to try hard and just think about the next move. And that is the most important learning part of this exercise, is that you're acknowledging how your mind responds to the messages of your body being tired. I found the one more move exercise super beneficial because what it did is also help me understand what it felt like to fall off the wall when I knew I physically really could not make a single more move. I'm gonna keep going. Till I fall off.
Okay. Don't fall on me, please.
I don't know how else to word this. I mean this in a very good way, but it helps you understand how much and to what point the physical suffering can get to, as far as all of those fatigue experiences that we feel before your mind gives up. Is a useful exercise for you to just take a moment to think about what it feels like and to what extent you're going to allow those messages from your body being like, oh, I'm really pumped, oh, I'm really fatigued. How high can those messages get before you come off? As soon as you start to think about at what point your mind decides to listen to those messages, to think about, oh, my body's telling me I'm pumped, but I'm just going to make one more move. And I'm going to keep climbing and I'm going to see what happens. And the amount of times, me personally, I have been seriously surprised that I didn't fall off. That has been wildly beneficial for my climbing. I think it's important to remember that everyone is different. Climbing is an individual sport. The entirety of your success and the outcomes of your climbing are based on the psychological headspace of just one person, and that is you. The more we can put time towards our psychological headspaces while climbing, the better we're going to get an understanding of how our minds rule our physical outcomes of our climbing. I want to stress that these are psychological exercises. The point of them is not to have a particular outcome, but to better understand yourself and what it is that you think as a climber. Because everyone will take away something different from this, everyone is individual, but if you take a moment to understand what your mind is doing when you're faced with these physical challenges of having to pull hard, or faced with the physical challenges of feeling really physically fatigued or pumped, if you're using that mental awareness, you can better understand what it is that's going to help you in your process. As someone who's super interested in the sports psychology side of climbing, self-awareness in climbing is something that probably isn't talked about as much as I'd like to see. I'm super interested to know what everyone else thinks of these exercises because they're a bit rogue, but I've just found them personally really beneficial for my own journey with the psychological state of climbing. Really all thoughts welcomed. Please Tell me if you guys tried these and thought that they were like absolutely bizarre and you hadn't even begun to think about the psych side of climbing, or if you tried them and they really helped you better understand when it's appropriate to bring in those power pulls or the passive pulls, and what it feels like for you to try really hard and get into the flow state. So if it helps anybody, amazing. If it brings up any thoughts, would love to hear about them. Comment in the sections down below. You can subscribe to this channel because there's going to be loads more videos like this. Thanks for watching. This has been another Climbing Calm episode. That's an icy beverage. You all thought I was drinking tea.